as well. All right, floor is yours, guys and gals. Who would like to kick us off? And there is no right or wrong way to begin it. So awesome. We have two runner-ups. I see Luke was first. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool, everything I heard so far. Did I understand correctly is my question. Results will be viewable in real time, but like private? Like
yes.
They will be, yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
So, technical limitation is that if we distribute the blockchain in a way that you would normally distribute the blockchain, like Cardano is, it will go slowly, which defeats what we're trying to do, which is vote quickly. So the aim here is to get you timely blockchain data in a way that doesn't affect our ability to produce a quick blockchain that can consume large numbers of votes. So the answer that we're going to do in the interim, while we come up with a better solution, is to publish the blockchain in pieces in very timely intervals, so like hourly. So rather than having a 20-second block, you imagine it's like an hour. But once we do that, after the first hour of voting, you're going to get another block which has got 2 hours of voting in it, and you're going to get another artifact which has got 3 hours of voting in it. So you'll be able to actually check and go, well, the first hour was there, and it's actually, again, without any edits in the second hour, and it was there again in the third hour. So you'll be able to validate that the blockchain hasn't actually been edited at all, that the data in it is what has been cast, and the votes are all encrypted. So even if you know that, all you will know is that particular stake addresses have voted, but you won't know what they've voted. You'll just know that they have voted. Right? So that's the privacy preserving nature of the votes within Catalyst.
Very cool.
Okay, but we'll be able
Tom,
to get we'll be able to get a list of all of the stake addresses that have voted. Not what they voted for, just that they have voted, and that's going to be public as well.
Well, yes. So you won't know you will know which stake addresses have voted because it's part of the blockchain record, and you will know which stake addresses were registered. You will know what their voting power was, but we don't have any information that tells us who those stake addresses belong to. If you know that, well, that's information you're bringing to the table that we don't know. Okay. And it doesn't form part of the Catalyst algorithm for the purpose of the election or running the system. And so that's again why we want to publish the registration records and the voting power basically as soon as we do it, so that this is the full set of possible voters, this is the full set of voting power, this is it. Right? Once we've published it, there's no way for it to be changed, and it's independently verifiable based on blockchain data. So there's nothing in that that's actually private as well, because you could take the tools now and run the snapshot yourself, but you would have no way currently of validating, well, that's actually the snapshot that we're using. This way now you will be able to, and when we publish the Fund 9 data and the Fund 8 data and the Fund 7 data, et cetera, we'll publish those snapshots as well. You'll be able to rerun those, and you'll be able to validate, yes, actually, those snapshots are correct. They align with the blockchain data. It'll all be independently validatable. The way it's not directly answering your question, but it's probably something that everybody wants to know. So the way the cryptography works is we can add all of the cryptographically secured votes together, and that gives us a cryptographic result, an encrypted result, that we then use what they call committee keys to decrypt, which gives us the decrypted tally. But part of that process is producing a certificate with zero knowledge proofs that allows anybody to actually, without knowing the keys, validate that the encrypted tally and the decrypted tally match. It's a pretty complex process, but that's the way to prove it without, leaking the secrets of who voted for what.
And why are we so opposed from leaking the secrets of who voted for what, other than to protect from, all that kind of stuff that's going on?
Technically, the system isn't opposed to it. It's just how it's configured. So if the community said we want to have public voting, no problem. The system can do public voting. DREPs are intended to be de-anonymized at the end of voting. So they'll stay encrypted during the vote and up to the point of tally, so that what they're voting on can't sway the election. But at the end, they can be held accountable for what they voted on because they're voting for other people. Right? That's the principle. But the system is composable. So if the community decided Fund 11, we want to make it all public, that's fine. Totally okay. Right? It's
Awesome.
a feature. It's not a. It's just how it's been used in the past.
Thank you, Tom, for great questions. I would also, before going to Darlington, I would like to recognize there's some other team members here as well, alongside Stephen. I see Mikey there as well, so feel free to drop in at any time you have any thoughts about the topics at hand as well. And is there anyone else in the room, so I don't forget, just for the awareness?
Abby's here as well.
Is it an Abby? We might have Abby here as well. So we have a trio at least. So feel free between three of you always to complement each other's answers if you would like to.
Yeah, and we've got Cameron here too. I see him there. And I just dropped in the chat, but maybe to call it out. I know that there's, such an appetite to experiment with, should we have privacy? Should we not? And right, kind of stance from the team is we're just providing the tools to be able to do that. The system is composable, configurable. And right, I think for now, right, the idea is that we want to have privacy in Catalyst, and won't belabor those points. I know that we've talked about those in other contexts, but right, with the introduction of the testnet, this space for experimentation, what's really exciting is that we can start to play around with that if we want to simulate a result without privacy, if we want to actually run something on maybe outside of the funding lifecycle where there's not ADA at stake, how does that influence things? And then if we ultimately want to move that into the actual funding lifecycle, right? Like Stephen said, that's totally open. And what's just really exciting is that the testnet is going to give us the tools and the space to be able to play around with those things.
Yeah, without there being funds at risk, we can actually work with the community to work out exactly what they want, how they want it to look.
Awesome. Thank you both. Darlington, you want to kick to the next gear?
Yes, one clarification and then one question. Clarification on what's being protected. So as a tool presenting the information, you will be able to say N number of wallets voted on this proposal, but you won't be able to show that this person voted on that proposal. So you're protecting the what and then the how they voted, the yes or no, right?
Yes, we're protecting the how they voted.
And the what or no? Can you say that they stick addresses voted for these 5 proposals?
Yes. But you don't know what they voted. You don't know if they voted yes, no, or abstain on those 5 proposals.
Okay, so you can see which proposal they vote on, but not how they vote. Okay.
Yes, and you only know the stake address. So
Right.
you would have to know whose stake address that was in order for that to be privacy disclosing as well. Right.
Right,
Or
cool. Thanks for that.
the voting power is another way to.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Then the other question, or my question is, with the streaming of the blockchain to some object storage or something, can you speak towards the bootstrapping? Like somebody who has Drummond set up, who is providing a tool for real-time data, when they get that new block, what's the
So the basic process, because it's already bootstrapped, so you're basically setting yourself up locally if you want to explore that blockchain as a follower. So you start the node, and we'll document this clearly, but you start the node effectively as a follower, and you say, and here is the blockchain that you're going to, that you're recovering from. Your follower doesn't actually talk to the network, so it won't build new blocks, but it will index that entire blockchain that's got up to that point, and its API will work to let you interrogate the records in that blockchain.
Oh, so this is like a special purpose piece of software.
It's
That
just the
is-
Yomagunda blockchain. It's just how you start it.
Okay,
So we will clearly document this process so that it's
that makes sense. Well, with the Cardano node, when you start it, right? And if you need, you can like swap out the files. You have to shut it down, replace the file system, turn it off again, right?
yeah. So in this case here, you would take the file, you'd put it where it needs to go, then you'd start the Jormungandr blockchain and point it to that file when you start it, and it'll come up and recover it. Up to
So then you
up to-
do this every hour, you shut it down, put the new file, start it again.
You can, depends how often you want to do it, but you can. All right.
Okay,
This
well,
is-
that might be a little bit painful, but I guess we'll wait for the documentation.
The aim it is a little bit painful. We're not pretending that it's going to be perfectly smooth, right? Especially in the first instance. This is the very first iteration of doing this, and we want to iterate on this with the community to make it better and to make it, you know, able to be consumed in a nicer way. But part of what we're thinking is we need to make the data available first, then the community can work out how we do these tools with us. We don't have to actually do all of the tooling. That's not what Catalyst is about. It could actually be part of future Catalyst funds for people to put proposals in to improve on this state. I think to me, that's actually part of the exciting thing about Catalyst is it's able to produce its own answers without individuals having to always have to come up with the same answers. Does that answer what you
Yeah,
wanted,
that
Dale?
makes sense. Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Robert?
Yes, how you doing?
Good.
I just want to introduce myself. I'm Robert Bruni. I'm the founder of ScheduleSite.com, and I provide scheduling media content for your calendar with one click. And I'm planning to build on the Cardano blockchain. And thank you for the talk, Stephen. Very informative. As I was listening to you, you basically were mentioning a bunch of dates in reference to voting and various events that are occurring. I myself, being new to the not the Cardano community, but the Project Catalyst community, I would like to be informed of all of these dates that are occurring pertaining to Project Catalyst and or other Cardano related events.
Yep.
And I would be more than happy to host these events on my platform so other community members can basically add these events to their calendar with one click as well. I was wondering, is there an API that I can possibly tap into to get that information?
There is, and there's an improved API that we're about to deploy for this purpose. So
Okay.
it will give you, like as I touched on in my talk, previous funds were individual. So we had Fund 9, it was all by itself. We had Fund 8, it was all by itself. There was a little bit of information in there, like, you know, Fund 9 would tell you what the tentative dates for Fund 10 were, but that's all. What we're going to do is we're publishing a new API that will let you get all of the data for all the previous funds, plus all of the data that we have for future proposed funds. And that might not be, you know, if we could put dates in for Fund 12, but they're possibly going to change because it's not, you know, it's not set in stone yet. It's 3 funds out, but we can start planning that, and that way, when the community decides, okay, well, this is what the budget is, and we can actually key that into the future plan, and so the plan will get clearer as it gets closer. But that data will definitely be there, and that API is just about to be published. All right, the future
Okay.
API. It's currently being worked on, so it should be launched within the next couple of weeks.
Any specific area or some place I can actually, you know, target to capture that information once it's available?
Yeah, I mean, and this is the other thing, right? So I'll give you, so the link, the main place that we're actually developing all the back end stuff is in this repo, and that API is actually in there now. It's just in a branch. So that's the main GitHub repo for all of the back-end source code. You can go there and see what we're currently doing at any time. And you can review it as well. If you look at something and you've got questions, you can pose them. You can put them as an issue, or you can come and talk to us in Discord, or you can, you know, talk to us in Twitter space, right? So that's we want to be open in this way, and we don't want to just be developing in an ivory tower. We want to be, you know, getting the community to come along and interact. We've already had some good feedback with wallets, which we work with quite closely, and we want to get that across the ecosystem, not just to be constrained to certain groups. So, you know, if you're looking at this API and it's not solving what you want, I'd want to hear about it so I can actually think about, you know, is this data we can provide? And if it is, how can we do it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the information. Appreciate it.
No problem. And I'll also share this link. So for those who aren't technical, the documentation can be more easily read in this, in the second link I posted, and Mike has posted the draft of our current, our new API that's being worked on. So that the link I posted above is the rendered documentation of all of the Catalyst core stuff. And again, this is an iterative process, and we welcome people to actually push changes or even just ask questions if there's stuff in there that they don't understand.
On that subject, Stephen, I'm Stephen Wood, still a QA DAO. The documentation and procedures relating to auditability. How is it planned to implement that? Would that be through a series of workshops with the community, for example, so how to encourage the community to collaborate and contribute to the content of the Catalyst repository insofar as it relates to documentation? How does that how does that complement Cardano's open source strategy? And could there be any incentives to contribute?
I mean, certainly there could be incentives, because you can publish proposals to Catalyst to actually contribute in a certain way. I haven't actually talked internally to anybody about doing workshops and things, but it's certainly a good idea. I think it's something we should definitely, expand upon and try and see what we can do there.
So it's like, as you said before, like a composable situation. So it's also going to depend on the initiative of the community. So to step forward and do that. Okay, that's good to hear. Thanks, Stephen. That's great. Yeah, no, I mean, and I'm very collaborative with this process. I mean, it's very technical. It's very difficult. So, I'm not. I mean, as we've seen with SIP 6094, what's very interesting is how to get people involved and how to get people can contribute, but there's also a kind of communication aspect to that as well. Like you'll have people who are technically knowledgeable who will contribute, and that's great. But I'm thinking of how can we help people to contribute, I suppose. So, and I suppose, but as you say, that is if it's up to if the attitude of Cardano is let the community initiate that, then that's great.
It definitely is. Yeah. And like there's always different ways people can contribute, right? I mean, people can write code and they might not be good documenters, and there's people who are really good with words, and you get those two people together and then you can start producing some really good documentation. So that's what I would like to see, this evolve into.
Thanks, Steve.
We're all of the mind that Fund 10 is going to be an opportunity to workshop a whole load of different topics. In preparation for Fund 11. We talked about some of this last week with the discussion around categories and how we scope what should be priorities for Catalyst to fund, and then we can certainly consider the technical architecture, and then the ways in which we're all able to play an active role has been something that also needs to be workshopped for sure. And then this would just set us up in a holding pattern to continually do these sorts of collaborative workshops where actually all of these sorts of topics are going to be unpacked, driven by you guys in the community.
Absolutely. I'll preface it by the fact that we don't have all the answers, but I'm pretty confident we're going to get as many answers as we can when we start doing these things together, which is a major reason why we're following through and the proposed changes and the conversations that we've had today to begin. So like, I know that somebody said they needed to run away. This is just a start. This is one of many, many to come. Hopefully what is going to be an ongoing conversation on these topics, and it will be including everybody who is interested, hopefully. All right, Nin, over to you.
Thanks, guys. Hello, everybody. Just looking at the documentation for the API, super valuable. You guys have done an amazing job actually just documenting everything. So I'm excited for the community to dive deeper. Let's say that let's say that in conjunction with the API documentation and the Project Catalyst that's open source, right? Let's say that the community would like to perhaps implement alternative voting methods, perhaps quadratic voting, or perhaps like identity layer and so on. Can they contribute to
That's
to
retarded.
Yeah, in a heartbeat, I'd accept that. No problem.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's the main reason I want to run the continuous testnet, is because it gives us a playground that we can play with, you know, together. So if somebody contributes quadratic voting, well, that's great. But now you need people to play with it and say, well, okay, how's this work? What does it look like if we're going to vote this way before you take it anywhere near production? And that way we can say, okay, well, let's, you know, every third week, let's run a quadratic voting event. Let's see. And then the people can actually play with it with the tooling and then see, yeah, do we like this or not? And then we can, you know, it gets to a point where people are comfortable with it, they like it. It can be the standard in production, no problem.
How do we get access to the test staging testnet?
Well, so that's the point. There isn't one at the moment. Like I said, for all the previous funds, they were stood up just for that a fund, and they were stood up before the fund for a couple of limited tests, and you know, QA are running tests in test environments, but they're not really publicly accessible. And this I think is an issue, but it's because of the way we developed the system as an experiment. But I think we're mature enough now that we don't want to keep that. You know, that's going to be a barrier to us actually getting more engagement, to getting better development and getting better understanding of the system, which is why I'm a big advocate of us having a continuous testnet so that we can do these things, and so that it is, you know, not so opaque. Because if you only run it 4 times a year, it's not enough for anybody to get comfortable with it or to get, you know, to understand it in any great way.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen.
No worries.
Hi, Stephen. I think I might be able to ask a question next. I'm just curious about DREPs and where they fit into the architecture, looking at the visualization, just for helping me explain to people that I work with internally to give them a better feeling for where this fits into how the tools that we're going to be able to build. So could you just speak about DREPs and where they appear in the architecture?
Yep. So I'm going to defer to Abby in a minute, but I'll talk to you because there's 2 different levels for DREPs. So the absolute technical level for DREP is based on the voter registration. So there's a record that we create for voter registration, and what you used to have in previous funds, Fund 9 and earlier, is a single voting key. And so that gave that, you know, the stake address worked out your voting power, and that voting key could actually use that voting power to vote on the fund. With DREPs, it's been changed so that you can now have multiple voting keys, and those voting keys don't have to be related to that stake address. It could be your voting key, for example. I could use that in my registration, and I could give you all of my voting power, or I could, you know, give half my voting power to Darlington and half my voting power to you, and that's a DREP at the absolute lowest technical level. The system doesn't really know at that level that, you know, you could have 2 keys. The system doesn't know. But that's how we're doing delegated representatives, so that you can choose who gets how, you know, what voting keys will get how much. Now, this is where I'm going to defer to Abby, because this is his area of work in IO. Abby?
Yeah, thanks. So essentially then on the front end, what will end up happening is you will see a list of DREPs who've applied to become DREPs in the platform. And then when you delegate, you are creating a delegation transaction to delegate your voting power to them instead of voting yourself. So we have the lower level main chain delegation, and then we read those delegations during snapshot and continuous snapshot events and ensure that the voting takes place. The voting power is allocated accordingly based on the delegations made. And then post voting, then of course we have the decryption. Because you were a public DREP, your votes would be decrypted and made available.
Yep. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah. Yeah, you can go to the next one. I'm just trying to place where I think that it'll make more sense to some of my teammates if I can share the architecture stack and some of the other slides. So we'll find some more answers in there.
Yeah. So there's two SIPs that deal with the registration, which is where you've got the tech. So SIP 36 is the main one that you would want to look at. SIP 15 is the older registration. It's useful to see the evolution between those two. But SIP 36 will be the primary registration format we'll use moving forward. But, like I said, at the lowest level of the system, it doesn't know the difference between you having 3 keys or you giving your voting power to 3 different people. Right? There will be ways in the new API for you to actually query that. So you'll be able to go and say, for my stake address, what voting power did I actually give to people? And there's a cap. So at the moment, there's a system parameter where you can cap their voting power to say a maximum of 1% of total ADA. So if a DREP got 5% delegated to them, they would only ever get 1% of voting power. And the reports out of the system will actually tell you this. So as a voter, you'll be able to go, oh, I delegated to this guy, but actually he's already fully saturated and my votes are now going to be wasted. So you can make an informed decision about, well, I'm going to vote for myself, or am I going to give my votes to a different DREP?
Thank you.
I can't actually see the hands.
Nin, do you still have a question, Nin? Oh, okay.
No, sorry, I left it on.
No worries. Question. But before my question, silly question. When are we gonna see your first price prediction on Twitter? Now that you're on Twitter.
Am I on Twitter? Is that what you're asking?
Well, you are on Twitter. When are we going to see your first price prediction for 2023?
I don't do price predictions.
Good answer. My real question: these keys, who's holding them, and what's the quorum for decrypting?
Which keys?
Stuff?
For the tally or for the voting? There's keys everywhere.
I know there's keys everywhere.
So the voting key is produced by your wallet.
Oh no, the keys on the Jormungandr side of things for the
So,
I guess the tally, yeah.
Yeah. So at the moment, so the base maths is designed to have what they call a tally committee, where you can have n number of people participate in the tally. But so currently, for all of the last 9 funds, IO has been producing those keys and keeping them secret. And the reason for that is it's very difficult to organize this tally committee. Part of the reason we want to go to a distributed testnet is so that we can actually start iterating on what a solution for a distributed committee could be, and we can test it in a safe environment. Because one of the problems with a distributed committee, say you've got 6 people, and only, what if 2 of them decide not to actually complete the tally? Then the whole event is wasted, because you can't actually work out what the result is. So we need to make sure that if we do go to a distributed committee, that we understand what the risks are as a community, that we have experimented with that, we've actually had a chance to play with it, and that we're comfortable with that, and then move forward. Because if we don't, then we'll end up with, one person could throw the whole election, which is a possibility. All right. It's certainly not the state that we want it to be in. We want to have these tally committees. It's what the system's been designed to do. But without the ability to iterate, it's going to be difficult to get them in.
So with the tally committee, every key has to be present.
At the moment, and it's at the moment, and we've got a researcher currently looking at how we can do it with a subset of the keys, but it's a difficult cryptographic problem. So you've got two problems. You've got a very difficult cryptographic problem that has to be solved properly. You've still got to be able to validate that the tally was correct, so that the cryptographic tally, you don't want any individual committee member to be able to decrypt the votes, because that would break the privacy. So there's a bunch of technical problems, but then you've also got social problems with how do you choose this committee? Who are they? How do they organize? How do they exchange key material, which they have to be able to do? How do you do this in a secure way and still end up at the end with a result? All right. It's all doable. I think all of these problems are solvable, but I don't think they're solvable by fiat. I think we have to work through these issues and collaboratively work out what that looks like and how that works for Catalyst. That's what I think about that anyway.
Thanks. Go for it, Luke.
Yeah, I just had two things that's what I was thinking about. I guess is there a specification in the documentation somewhere for like the your manager chain, or does it just basically follow the latest node or ledger? And then also sorry, I'll answer that first. So yeah, Jormungandr is its own thing. It used to follow the old ledger. It's completely different. There is documentation on the ledger in the links I sent. How good it is, I can't attest to, because it's from the time when it was developed. So if there's stuff in there that you think looks funny, ask us and we'll try and get some answers. Sure. And the last part of that was I think you mentioned building dApps and like tools on top of that. Are there dApps and tools that are like open known issues, or is that for all of us here to figure out moving forward?
Building dApps and tools on top of Jormungandr.
Yeah.
I mean, you could. There was in the past, EVM that was being built for it and things like that. But Jormungandr's strength isn't that. It's not. I don't think its strength is as a general purpose blockchain, and there's plenty of those. Its strength is as a cryptographic, secure voting system. It's a voting ledger really now, and that's where it works. That's where it wants to be, because it's been pushed into that mold. I think you could use it as a general purpose blockchain, but I think there's probably better choices.
No, for sure. Cool.
Yeah.
So it's not a general purpose blockchain, but is it being pushed into being a Catalyst blockchain or a general purpose governance ledger?
It's currently just being used in Catalyst. Whatever else it might end up being, I can't really comment on because I don't know, right? But currently, its only use case currently is Catalyst. And like I said, I think for other, if you were doing general purpose blockchain stuff or sidechain stuff, I think there's probably better answers.
Well, not blockchain stuff, just governance stuff, right? Because I know one of the promise of the Cardano Voltaire era is that the blockchain, that the ecosystem, the base layer, not necessarily layer one as we know it today, but there is general purpose API that if a committee or a city or whoever or a club wants to run their governance, like those APIs are available to them, like just like the way you might reach for the native asset API today.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's part of the reason we want to have this continuous deployment and make it easy to deploy locally, is because that does mean people can actually deploy it independently and run it for their own purposes or make a variant of it. We want to actually do things differently. Okay, cool. That's why we make open source software, is so people can do that. That's what's good about it. Right. So but to do that, it has to be easy. It's like, you don't want to have to go and do everything from first principles all the time. You want to be able to just fire it up and run it and then dig into it as deep as you need to in order to change it the way you want.
So I guess that's Darlington's just you volunteered to do that, haven't you?
Sure. And when we get it to that point, we'd love it if people would experiment with it and try and run it and then, not work and then raise issues and say, we tried to do this and that and the other thing, and it didn't work. Because that's how we actually build better software together.
Right. I know that's all we have now, but is the future also DB sync? Or are we gonna have a purpose-built indexer just for Catalyst
I'd
stuff?
really love to talk to you about that in greater detail, and I'm pretty sure Danny's going to get me back at some time in the future to maybe do that.
Yeah, plenty of opportunities that we'll have to talk. As you see, we're pacing the information as we're releasing it, and there'll be more opportunities to pick Steven's brains in due time. So I'm really excited about that.
So am I, actually.
All right. Any other questions? Anything that you got inspired by, or something that you didn't know? Maybe Steven, do you want to bring back if you have the slide for the architecture? I think that might be nice.
Yep.
If somebody might get brain juice flowing, like, oof, I'd like to ask about this and that. I saw there was a nice bucket. Maybe we can touch upon that bucket, what it is, what its purpose is going to be. I think that's a nice conversation more broadly as well.
Yeah, and we've sort of gone all over the place. It would be cool to know what the line is for deliverable for Fund 10. So we don't get our hopes up. Or calibrate our expectations,
Let's see if the screen loads.
Something's loading. Wait for it.
I don't know if I can share it.
No problem. You know what? I'll find the slide and I'll put it up just in a second. Right.
Didn't want to work for me.
No worries. Ta-da! That should do it.
Oh, there it is.
What's on the slide? Can we go through it a bit again one more time? And I'm interested in the red bucket especially. So.
All right. So I'm going to start as far away from the red bucket as possible. So on the left, we've got the apps, right? There's the voting app, the current one, and the new GVC app, which is web-based. All of that stuff comes in through a load balancer, so that you see a unified view of our back end, which is pretty typical Web 2 technology. We've got the Cardano main chain at the top, DB Sync, and our importers are these two pipes here that get data from IdeaScale and DB Sync and inject it into the database at periodic intervals. Which again is going to be a change in Fund 10 over what we did in Fund 9. So in Fund 9, we did IdeaScale import once, and we did snapshot once. In Fund 10 and future funds, we're actually going to do snapshot a lot more, and we're going to get the data for the proposals and things earlier, so that people can actually see them in the UIs of these apps sooner. There's nothing particularly unique about these apps, except that we're making them. There will be nothing to prevent somebody else making their own voting app using exactly the same APIs. There's no secret APIs that we have access to that the community won't have access to. So if somebody wants to make their own voting app, totally can, no problem at all. All right. So we have our servers in the middle. We have Jormungandr blockchain down the bottom. And this red bucket here is where we're actually going to start the initial publishing of the auditable artifacts. So as we do our imports, we'll put data into a CDN, and we'll expose an API that actually allows you to query it and get the latest artifacts and the historical ones that we've published for that fund. So that's what that red bucket represents. And that's a new feature that we've not had before in Fund 9 or earlier. And we're going to be taking public backups of this blockchain data here to be stored in there at periodic intervals. So that's the 1,000-foot view.
are all these things on here, are they pretty modular? I guess I'm double clicking specifically on those imports tubes. Is that a
Yeah.
piece of thing that you could run and have it do other things? Or is
Yeah,
it all-
so the idea scale import is its own program, and it's in the repo. It's a Python program. And it imports directly into the database. So if you've got an idea scale API key, you can use it to import data from idea scale. The snapshot import is actually two tools. We do a raw snapshot from DB Sync, which actually gets all of the raw voting power with no parameters applied to it. It's just your absolute raw stake data for every stake address and their registration information. So what voting keys they've delegated to, and this sort of information. And it's done in such a way that we make sure that we've got the latest registration. So if you've posted 6 registrations over time, we'll only pick up the latest one. That's one tool. There's a second tool that takes that output, combines it with DREP information from this GVC database. There's no actual, the GVC system, there's no line there, but it does, to create the final snapshot artifact that has got the information in it about what a DREP is, and is this a DREP's delegation, and all of this stuff. And it produces another file, which we then import that data directly into the database. And so the command lines we use to run both of those tools, the DREP data that we get from GVC that says these stake addresses are DREPs, or these voting keys are DREPs, and the artifacts that we produced are what we'll publish, so that they'll be able to be independently run, and they can be run now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Although idea scale API keys are hard to come by, but
well, for idea scale, I don't know. I don't even know our idea scale API key. So,
other than that little hurdle,
the DB Sync is easier.
Cool. Yeah, right. Exactly. DB Sync's easier. Idea scale API key, not so much. I tried getting one for like 6 months once upon a time. They didn't happen.
No, but the idea scale import is, like I said, this stuff's iterative. I know there's data in here that I'd like to get out, but we need to iterate through this, and we need to work out how we can do that in a way that doesn't compromise personal information and all the stuff that we have issues with. Right? So, but as far as voting integrity go, if you've got the progressive blockchain and you've got the snapshot data, you can prove that the only votes in there are actual registered votes. Right, that the voting power that's being used to calculate is correct, that the tally is correct. You'll be able to prove that because you can independently do the tally.
So
right? You'll only get one answer. If you change it, you'll get a different answer. Right? If you run a test system, you'll be able to put test votes in and then do the tally and then see that it actually gets the answer you think it should. Right? And you'll be able to do all that independently on the same systems that we deploy.
Right. Wait, so are you saying, so that voting app, if I wanted to create a Tinder style voting app,
sure,
or something like that, maybe a 2-step where you do the swiping,
good,
then you do the up and down as a second step. But
yeah, I think
is it actually permissionless? Can I actually push actual results, or does that need to be permissioned by you guys?
No, so the all of that data you need to run the voting app is read only. So all you're doing is getting data from us about the event, the challenges, the proposals, etc. When you communicate, so you would be communicating like GVC, so you'll talk to the wallet through SIP62 and the SIP30 interface, and to do registration goes through the wallet, so it doesn't even come through our system and ends up on main chain. And to vote, we have an endpoint where you can pass in a vote, but we won't accept the vote if you've already voted. And we won't accept a vote unless it's a vote from a proper voting address. All right. So that's an open thing as well.
Address, you mean?
Yes. So if you said I want to vote with a stake address that isn't actually registered, that won't actually get that won't make it to the blockchain. It'll get rejected. If you try and double vote on the same proposal, it will get rejected. So that endpoint is open, but there's nothing you can do there except actually vote with a valid vote. Right, the vote is signed by your voting key. So if it's not signed, we'll reject it. So there doesn't need to be any permission there. Right, if you've got a valid vote signed by the valid voting key that hasn't voted before, cool, we'll take your vote. Right, so we don't need any auth to do that. You've proved who you are already through your wallet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Right, so that's why I say it's totally feasible for somebody to make their own voting app. I mean, I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. I think a two-step voting app, swipe left, swipe right, before you do your thumbs up, thumbs down would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's in this, it's in that area there. It's in the UX part, and where people can actually play with it and go, well, I mean, we've got a lot of information. What's the best way people can consume that, understand it, and make meaningful votes with it? I'm sure there's, put 100 people in a room, and they're probably going to come up with 100 different answers of what they think is going to be good. Unless you actually have a system that they can produce those answers and try and see, you're not going to produce the best possible system or the best possible tools.
Right, and there's also all these chat GPT type thing. I mean, you feed it all the proposals. You just chat through it too, right? Same idea. Sure. It can go somewhere. Anyways, this is cool. So, that diagram you were just showing, is everything on that diagram going to be live for Fund 10?
Yes. And probably a couple of things that aren't on that diagram, but talk about those at a different time.
And Fund 10 is launching on Epoch 420, right? To celebrate all the stoners in Cardano.
Steve, do you want to maybe give an overview on maybe what won't be, what won't be ready for Fund 10?
What do you mean?
Well, like we've just shown the arc diagram, and given the signal that that's what's going to be ready.
Yes.
We've got testnet that we want to spin up.
Yes.
Right? We've got the ability for people to be able to, run their own instances and be able to confirm and verify. To what extent are we going to be able to fulfill?
Well, to the extent that we can achieve, right? So we've got limited resources, but we're dedicated to getting it up in stages. So it won't be like suddenly we turn it on and we go, ta-da, everything's done, right? We're going to bring it up in stages with, in the full view of the community. We're not going to, there's no point in doing it any other way, in my opinion. So the idea here is to deliver as much as we possibly can and then iterate on that state, right? There's it's an automation process. It's technology. When is it actually done? Right? We've got to get it to the point where we're iterating. Once we're iterating, that's what we're trying to achieve. Right? Is it feature complete? No, because it'll never be feature complete, because we'll always think of new features that we want to add to the system.
That's for sure. I know Mike has a lot of thoughts as well. I don't want to put him entirely on the spot, but where's your head at with everything we spoke about today and how you're looking at through your lenses?
Shit, guys, I'm a broken record, but I'm just so excited to get to see the community get more involved. And like Darlington is already, I can see the wheels already spinning, but right, kind of imagining within Catalyst, right, if we could have this pluralistic ecosystem where we have things that are built by IOG, it's a reference implementation, we're helping to lead the way, but also if other people want to take it in different directions, slice data in a different way, present it in a different way. Maybe you only want to have a voting app for a single challenge, right? And building a community around a single challenge and really nailing the UX for just that, or even thinking further ahead, being able to make this a fit for purpose governance solution really for any community in Cardano. That's the stuff that gets me really, really excited. I know we're still a bit of ways, but the continuous testnet is a first major step in that direction. and just the prospect of getting people that want to come in and build with us and play around, and not only be able to harden tools that are going to support the Catalyst funding lifecycle as we get ready and be able to play with those production ready components at any time, but actually play around and experiment with those and in new ways is just super exciting to me.
Awesome. How about you, Abi? What's on your mind?
Yeah, first and foremost, like we've been working hard on SIP 62, SIP 36, a lot of the fundamental work required to allow for a pluralistic environment to exist where, you have multiple dApps which are able to interact regardless of who builds them. So yeah, I think a lot of the work is ahead of us. This is still, I feel like we are at the sunrise, so it's very exciting where we are, and there's only improvements coming, so super excited for the future, not only front end but even more interesting stuff beyond, which we are already thinking about.
Thanks, Avi. Do we have still Cameron with us, or I don't want to miss anyone else to give them an opportunity, or is it just three of you gentlemen? Cameron, what is on your mind? I want to also recognize you. I know Stephen, Mike, and Abi have spoken at length, but what's going through your mind? How are you looking at all of these things that we talked about today? Like, what tickles your fancy?
I'm just super excited. I think the big thing for me is documentation. I think we have, as someone who's like not particularly in the sort of Cardano community very much, I think we are like, we've always been an open source project, but we haven't been as open source as we could be. I think the fact that it's really hard to spin up a node at the moment, or well, it was a month ago, and now it's a lot easier and there's better documentation. I think it's true, like anyone could have looked at the source code, but it's like, how many people are realistically going to do that? Not very many. So I think I'm really happy with the direction we're going, where for everything we're building, we're thinking like, how are outsiders going to be able to use this? Is it going to be easy? When people join, do they know what a DREP is? It's a fairly weird word. Do they know what it does? So just making sure that it's actually easy to get involved and not just like technically possible. I think that's the thing I'm most excited about.
Thanks, Cameron. And I think you got Stephen excited as well.
Yeah, I was just going back to Stephen. Sorry, my name's Stephen as well, Stephen. But where you're talking about the implement things in stages. I used to, many years ago, I used to be a test manager, and one part of that is testing. So the unit testing is the user acceptance testing, and part of a move to an open source culture is there is an opportunity here for the community to get involved in testing, is there not? So, and that could be done through workshopping again, or something like that, or inducting people into use of the repository and Catalyst, or that kind of under the project Catalyst GitHub repository and all that. Like how do you do that? If you have a problem with voting and you've got a bug or an issue, how can you, that kind of thing. And that can help engagement with the community going forward as we transition to more our open source aims. So I find that quite exciting, Danny.
Exactly.
Awesome. We are at top of the hour, so I think we've been at it for a full hour today for the benefit of the viewers as well, so they don't have to go and sit through the 2-hour meeting as well. I think it's a good time to start closing down. Now we will publish this recording as well as soon as we can submit it to the Catalyst Swarm, so it will be available on YouTube for you to reference, especially if you had to maybe go catch your wife and bring her back home and you had to step away, you'll be able to rewatch. So thank you for coming back, Einstein. Appreciate you. I would like to preface it, especially that this is the first instance of many. We're going to have a lot of conversations in this realm. Stephen and the rest of the team is extremely excited about finally being able to talk in a language that actually a lot of people will be able to comprehend. it's important to highlight, as an IO team, we have a lot of ideas, but we also need help. And I think that's where each and everybody will be instrumental in trying to steer the direction in a way that, does this make sense? Do we want to validate different directions? That's where all the testness and things are going to come in quite handy. But we don't have all the answers, but I'm pretty sure if we get everybody in the room, we have higher chances of solving, really, as we call them, wicked challenges in Catalyst. So there's a lot of work still ahead of us. I hope this gives you an excitement about the direction, tentatively, in which the Catalyst is heading towards. There's a lot of things that will need to be figured out because we don't have the answers for them, but I'm hoping that you'll be along for the ride and start helping with it as well. So hope everybody has enjoyed the time today. Again, it's just the beginning. I would like to thank Stephen, Abby, Cameron, and Mike that were able to come here today. Mind you, there's a lot of other people on the team that are putting things together. As you can see, like months of the dryness on the front end is going to break soon. And all of these things, we've been working quite diligently as a team over the past couple of months as such. And hopefully we're not too far from rolling the rest of these things. So again, thank you so much for your time and thoughts today. And again, we will be hosting Twitter Space tomorrow, where you are also invited, and we made Stephen sign up for Twitter as well. So be nice to him tomorrow if you do come around as well. So if you want to jump into this conversation in the Twitter Space, we'll be more than excited as well. So again, thank you so much, and I'll see you around.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Just a quick plug for a Docker Compose file. Once you guys have something working while you're waiting.